Thanks for listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Do remember you can subscribe to Farmers Weekly magazine and get all the latest news, views and market prices by visiting fwi.co.uk.
No, there's still so much work going on, but we purposely took the decision to bring the profile of this work down, to really try and work with those backbench Labour MPs, because they are the only ones that can force a decision here.
Labour celebrates a year in power, a tumultuous year for farmers. Just why have farm leaders gone quiet on inheritance tax? We look ahead to harvest as the first combines roll into barley and Hugh visits his local Cowpie show. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
With no Louise with us this week, she's gone on a well-earned holiday and we go straight to our top story. It's been a year since that landslide Labour victory, Labour coming to power, a huge year for farmers in terms of policy coming out of Westminster, most notably Labour's decision to impose inheritance tax on farming assets worth more than £1 million. Well, earlier this week, Farmers Weekly's Phil Case caught up with NFU President Tom Bradshaw, one of the biggest critics of the government when it comes to inheritance tax. And Phil started by asking Tom why, after a winter of protest, have things gone so quiet when it comes to battering the government on inheritance tax?
No, there's still so much work going on, but we purposely took the decision to bring the profile of this work down, to really try and work with those backbench Labour MPs, because they are the only ones that can force a decision here. You know, nobody else can force a change in the lie of the land. So I'm hearing now of members that are being offered meetings with backbenchers that for 7 months they've been anonymous. They haven't been welcome to have meetings or haven't been invited to have meetings. I think they're really positive signs. And look, I wouldn't say there's the level of animosity that perhaps there was 3-4 months ago, and the conversations are generally much more receptive. MPs that are willing to take actions to write into James Murray and really keep it on his agenda. And that's exactly what we want out of those meetings. So never let up. And we will continue to try and make headway with those backbenchers ahead of the autumn budget, which is when, if they're going to make change, and look, I still believe they have to make change. They can't leave the human element of this policy. It's simply unimaginable that a Labour government would leave a policy in place that has those unintended consequences.
So moving on, the blue tongue restrictions, which are about to come into effect across the whole of England, they're causing a real headache, aren't they? There's
a massive problem here. And obviously we're the NFU of England and Wales. So we've been working really closely with NFU Cymru. But the fact that there's not going to be, without pre-movement testing, you're not going to be able to move any cattle that haven't been vaccinated with Boltavo. Sheep, that doesn't count. So sheep, even if they've been vaccinated with Boltavo, you still have to have a pre-movement test. And the fact that you're not going to be able to move into Scotland or into Wales, big problem for livestock auctioneers. A huge amount of livestock go through those markets July, August, September. And that cross-border movement is something which is just an essential part of the livestock industry. And I don't think the economic impact is fully understood by either Welsh or Scottish government. Now, obviously, we've got a unified position with NFU Cymru, but at the moment, NFU Scotland are representing their members' views, and their members are saying, look, we want to do all we can to keep the disease out. But I'll be meeting the presidents of the NFU, of all the NFUs this week, farming unions. And so we'll get our heads together and see if we can make any progress in that area.
And we heard today that the cost of vaccinations or pre-movement tests is £40 a pop. This is a huge concern, isn't it, for farmers who are looking to move their stock into Wales?
Look, it's a huge concern, the cost of it. But also, look, the vaccination's only really suitable for breeding livestock. You're not going to use the vaccination on animals that are moving via a market to an abattoir. And so that's a dead end. You're never going to be willing to invest that vaccination into that animal because you're not going to get any return on that cost. We have seen in Norfolk some deformities around calving where they've had the disease, and that is something that members just need to be aware about, that there are welfare issues here. And what Welsh and Scottish government are trying to do is say the welfare impacts are potentially more, we've got to stop that over and above the financial impacts. We just don't believe the economic impact assessment is really showing up what the true impact will be on the movement of livestock both ways across the border.
And are there any sort of key asks of Welsh Government or of the Westminster Government in terms of blue tongue and how we can approach this difficult situation?
Well, Alan Jones, Welsh NFU Cymru President, and myself wrote to our respective ministers jointly and CVOs last Friday, really asking for them to look at that impact assessment to make sure they really understand the full consequences of this. And I think we might arrive at a different policy if they fully interrogate that. So I don't think it's sustainable to believe that midge aren't going to fly across the border, that there isn't going to be an incursion into Wales. You look at the heat maps and it's highly likely that once we get blue tongue circulating, we've already hit the temperature levels in Wales to get it in certain areas. So the midge will be circulating and transmitting the disease. And I think that it's folly that we're going to stop this disease crossing the borders. And we just need a practical, pragmatic policy that mitigates the impacts on, the biggest impacts, financial impacts on our members.
Harvest 2025 is literally around the corner. What's the latest you're hearing from growers?
The arable sector is having a really tough time, and the values are below the cost of production. It's going to be another harvest which certainly doesn't fill the sheds, and it is really, really difficult for the arable sector at the moment. But then those that are busy irrigating, they started irrigating in April. They're not going to have enough water to carry right the way through the season. So we're going to need some flexibility around government there about abstraction. If we do suddenly have thunderstorms, let's use those rivers when they're in flood for a very short period of time and allow some water to be taken out to fill those reservoirs. Fodder shortages is something that I think is going to be very live in some areas, and derogations around the ability to graze some of those environmental areas would be something which is very welcome. But then also the availability of straw, which was something brought up there in council, and it's something we're very, very live to. But the crops are thin, they're short, and I think that the straw market clearly is going to be very tight as well.
And finally, we heard today that there is a growing concern from farmers about retailers and that the lack of support in some instances for British product. What is the feeling amongst growers, and what would be your plea to the retailers?
But particularly where retailers are driving standards, and in this I mean poultry, and where they're driving standards from 38 kilograms down to 30 kilograms, and then when the moment the market gets tight and the market gets tough, they've been willing to bail out and try and go abroad to find something more competitive. That is not the commitment that the industry deserves and the industry needs to have the confidence to invest in the facilities, poultry facilities for the future. Those sheds cost £1 or £2 million, and depending on how many you're building. But there's a significant investment needed there. And why will people do that if they haven't got the confidence that the supply chain is going to be fair? And that's what we're looking for, is fairness. So if retailers want poultry produced to 30 kilos, let's sell everything produced to 30 kilos and treat everyone fairly. At the moment, I think there's a big discrepancy there, and that is really, really unfair. I mean, for the beef market, again, look, I think our surprise is some of the retailers that have done this, because they've traditionally been very, very loyal to British, and that's been one of the US unique selling points. Has been the fact that British is their thing, and now they've reneged on that, and it's really, really uncomfortable. But we're also seeing it in some of the high end. Taste of difference, as well as some of the lower end, and again that again is creating real concern. The volumes of imports coming in are much higher than they have been, and what does that say to the UK farmer here about where they should invest their money for the future? And we've got to work together to build the confidence of the industry, to build that investment, and make sure that that product is available. And if we decimate the confidence, then we really are going to massively undermine the availability of product moving forwards.
Our NFU President Tom Bradshaw talking to Farmers Weekly's Phil Case a year after that landslide Labour victory. Labour coming to power, what that has meant for farmers over the past 12 months, especially in relation to inheritance tax, and what it means indeed going forward. We're going to pick the bones out of that in just a moment, but first, a short break.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And now a word from our podcast sponsor, Syngenta. Syngenta's Fields of the Future survey highlights UK farmers' top concerns. 48% cite nitrogen fertiliser limits and 34% worry about lack of new chemistry as major challenges for cereal growers in the next 5 years. Syngenta's breeding programmes are addressing these issues through crop hybridisation and innovative traits. Recent successes include Hyvedo hybrid barley with BYDV resistance, with a focus on seed and soil-borne diseases coming soon. Hybrid wheat expected to increase yields by up to 10% and improve crop resilience is on the horizon. Syngenta remains committed to equipping farmers for an ever-changing agricultural landscape. Read more in Farmers Weekly and FWI online at fwi.co.uk.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You are indeed listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast 1 year on since the Labour government came to power. A wide-ranging interview there before that break with NFU President Tom Bradshaw, Hugh. Let's try and unpick it a little bit by bit. This softly approach we'll start with when it comes to inheritance tax. Is it working?
Yeah, I think at the end of the sort of protest season, of the winter of protest and the spring, and clearly, as we said at the time, there's coming a point where the protests had their place, they'd done their thing. Logistically, it's going to be tricky when everyone starts to get really busy on farm as well, as everyone did in the spring. And we said that the thing to do is exactly what they're doing, and is courting those backbench Labour MPs, of which we know there are a lot. We know there are lots of them that are sat there thinking they could be one election wonders, one-term wonders, lots of other reasons, not just because of farmers and IHT and BPR and APR. So, it's absolutely the right thing to do. I suppose the key thing is, as Tom says in the piece, it's about everyone getting on, particularly if you're in one of those constituencies, because in some places there's worries. When you I was talking to someone in Parliament the other week, and they were saying the worrying thing was that in some cases, the mailbag load, and that's a really, as odd as it sounds and as traditional as it sounds, it's a really big thing in terms of MPs, and MPs function day to day. If their mailbag is off the Richter scale talking about a particular issue, then they tend to think that it matters to their constituencies, so they get on with it or get onto it. And there's a worry that people need to keep up the pressure, even if they've written before. Keep writing, and keep it hot, keep it on the agenda, and slowly tapping away.
And farm leaders and farmers themselves are going to be buoyed by the fact that the Labour government has performed a number of U-turns in recent weeks. First on the winter fuel payments, and now it's got itself in a mess over welfare cuts. A U-turn on that as well. It does show that pressure can have an effect.
It can, but I think to put it into context, if you look at the numbers involved and the sort of universality of things like the winter fuel payments and the welfare thing that's happening at the moment, these are huge issues, and they affect loads and loads of Labour, or Labour MPs feel that they're going to affect loads and loads of their constituents. Therefore, they're all over it like a rash sort of thing. The challenge is making the inheritance tax issues, succession tax issues for all businesses. It's not just farmers. Let's not forget that. Is making it as hot an issue as you can with that, just to get them to engage. They are the only key, really, to the government changing its mind and them putting the pressure on the parliamentary party to say, you've got to rethink on this. I mean, there's other things that has happened. Obviously, the EFRA report from the other month, where the committee came out and said that the government needs to pause this for at least a year until it's properly consulted. And then, of course, we've had news this week that there's a judicial review being launched by a private law firm and a group of farmers. And I think there are other businesses as well. It's not just farm businesses in there who are basically saying, judicial reviews are about process. They're not about changing the policy. They're about how the process works. They are querying the process of law and change of regulation. And they're basically saying that, come on, mate, you haven't consulted on this, you've jumped on it. So it'll be interesting to see if the judge, it'll take a while to get through the court. Well, let's hope it moves quickly, because obviously these MPs are likely to vote on this finance bill probably after the summer recess in sort of early September. There is a hope, if the judge was to turn around on that JR and say, actually, Treasury, you didn't consult on this, then they'll be forced to pause it somewhat. It would be great if they could just come to a compromise position and everyone was happy. And we know that is there. So we just got to keep tapping away. And everyone involved, as I said before, we know that you keep writing to your MPs, keep highlighting this an issue. And it is a huge issue. It's a huge issue for loads of people. And it's not just farm businesses, it's other businesses as well.
Interesting that this group of farmers bringing this, asking for this judicial review, as yet unnamed. We don't actually know who they are.
No, and it's a private action. Obviously, I suppose the farmers have gone round and found other small businesses and farm businesses, all of whom are in the same boat when it comes to succession of those business assets from one generation to the other, and are fearful of the consequence and how it's going to break the business up to effectively pay the tax bill. And yeah, fair play to them. They've quietly got a group of people together, appointed a solicitor, and that person served those papers and sought leave of the High Court to ask for judicial review. Let's hope it's successful. But it'll be interesting to see how the judges how they see it either way. Obviously, there was one around the VAT on private school fees, and the judge there, unfortunately, saw there was some damage to the quality of life and to the issues, particularly around special needs education, but felt that in that particular case, that the VAT being charged, because the government says it's about using the VAT taken on those private school invoices to help fund state education. The judge said that in the round, it was more beneficial to the greater populace of school children than the impact it was causing on those few children who the claimants, said that it was affecting. In this case, I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? Just on the basis of consultation, there was no consultation. So at least you could say, I suppose, in some ways, with the VAT on school fees, it was talked about in the press months before Labour even came to power. It was a flagship thing they put out there 12 months before the election. Where this just came from nowhere, didn't it, in that October budget? So we'll have to, fingers crossed, we'll have to wait and see.
We will indeed. Let's look at a number of the other things Tom Bradshaw talked about in that interview with Phil Case. Poultry and a lack of perceived support from retailers bringing in product from abroad, Hugh.
Yeah, and it's a big worry because the UK poultry industry has made huge, and you speak to any of the people involved in chicken production in the UK over the last 2-3 years, and they have invested huge amounts of time and money moving everything to a lower stocking density, basically because the retailers kept saying, and everyone kept saying, and pressure groups, obviously, who don't like people growing chickens to eat, kept saying. So they said, right, we're going to go for this lower stocking density, 30 kilos a metre, and that's a huge difference between where some of them were before. And so they do all that, and actually it puts pressure on UK chicken supply because suddenly you can't produce as much chicken with the same number of sheds. Producers have to go out and invest huge amounts of money. As Tom said, it's a couple of million quid for a big 300-foot chicken shed now. They go out and spend all this money, get all kitted up, and they're in the process of getting kitted up. And then some of the good old retailers go out and buy whatever from wherever. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, it's quite right to call it out because it's not on. And it comes back to the whole provenance thing, doesn't it? And how do we effectively, we talk about blooming assurance till we're blue in the face, like some of these subjects we're always talking about. But this is a key thing, isn't it? How do you highlight, how do you communicate that to consumers to say, look, we are busting a gut here to do the best we can for the animals, for the consumer, the environment, and yet, you still go into the same shop and then no questions asked when you buy a ready meal and it's got some chicken in it that's come from somewhere a long way away where they're not kept in the same way. So it needs to be constantly called out. And those retailers need to be constantly questioned, particularly when it's a bit like the beef thing when we saw, Morrison, supposedly the big backer of British farming and sponsor of Clarkson's Farm and everything else. And boom, there they are bringing in steak from Australia. So it needs to be called out constantly by everyone across the chain, everyone that's involved in production. If you see it, call it out. Simple as.
Yeah, import standards certainly exercising the minds of British poultry producers who have done so much to increase the standard of domestic production. Hugh, blue tongue exercising the minds of Welsh producers and concerns over the government's stance when it comes to keeping blue tongue out of Wales.
Blue tongue. Look, we talked about this last week, didn't we? And this craziness, and understand with the frustrations of building. We're coming up to the deadline, 1st of July, whole UK or whole England blue tongue zone, and here's the poor Welsh and English producers as well, and they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. There was a great piece of film on the Facebook yesterday, I think it was, from Knighton Market, saying, there's a whole lot of lambs here from England, fantastic lambs that Jenny was showing down the lines from England, which was half a mile over the hill from the market. And as of the 1st of July, they can't come in. Well, they won't be able to come in. No one's going to blood test them all at 40 quid a pop to get them into the market. So lots of people still calling out the Welsh government on this position they've got on blue tongue, and the fact that they're only allowing vaccinated cattle, vaccinated with Bivalto, to come into Wales. It's going to cause it is already causing problems. It's going to cause loads of problems. And actually, what they could have done is just be more pragmatic and just get on with it, as we said last week. And there's a vaccine there. Blooming well use it and get on and stop disrupting trade, because that's effectively what they're doing. And the Scotch to a certain degree as well, with this deluded idea that, midges will stop at the border, is it? It's just bonkers.
Well, we've got an email this week, Hugh, from Stuart Fuller Shapcott, a podcast listener, who says, I keep reading about the blue tongue restrictions into Wales. No mention of the same absurd restrictions to move sheep into Scotland. Well, you've just mentioned it. Stuart says, I'm in the Scottish borders and I have sheep both sides of the border, and I'm expected to blood test any that I need to move back home into Scotland, half a mile away. Crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely mad. Can you imagine this whole, it's just, I get that they're trying to do their best for, yes, we're protecting our stock by keeping out this disease, yada, yada, yada. But the reality is that, the vaccine is now available. I think the vaccine's now running. It seems to be running in fairly good numbers in terms of supply. There was a bit of lumpiness at the beginning. People have just got to get on and use it. And if the disease runs, it runs. I mean, it's just, and to a certain degree, I think part of the solution, or part of the reasoning for the whole England zone, APHA sort of, well, not quickly, because it's taken a long time, are realising that the licensing and blood testing and everything that they were doing, and to be fair, they were paying for all the blood testing. We did several moves from the east into the west with cattle to finishers, and they paid for all the blood testing. We ran them to Purbright because we lived just around the corner from it and happened. But times that by X million cows and X million samples, and it was costing them an absolute fortune. And the reality was, this, as we said before, the chances are this is going to bubble up all over the place anyway. Now that it's heated up, we got mega heat coming beginning of next week. If the virus isn't now properly circulating in the midges, then I'd be really surprised. So it's what's going to be really frustrating. Look, if it keeps all the disease out of everywhere, and Scotland stays disease-free for another 10 years, and Stuart has to go through the pain and hardship of trying to farm either side of the border, poor guy, along with all the other people, his colleagues in the borders, and all the people down the Welsh-English border. And if it all stays in England, great. But it's not going to, is it? And that's the reality of it. They push everyone through all this heartache and pain and stress and cost, only to find that in a couple of weeks, there'll probably be a bubble up of disease in the middle of Wales or in the middle of Scotland. And then it's just, there are a lot of other battles that we need to fight, particularly on the animal health front. And blue tongue at the moment isn't one of them, particularly when there is a vaccine out there.
Hugh, as always, thank you very much. Just a few of the big issues affecting UK agriculture during Labour's first year in power. I'm sure you've probably got issues of your own. If you have and you want us to cover them here on the Farmers Weekly podcast, please do email us, podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm, followed by your message to 88440. We'd love to hear from you.
The Farmers Weekly podcast.
If you're heading to the Royal Highland or Royal Welsh shows this summer, make sure you stop by the Case IH stand. See our latest machinery up close and have a chat with our expert team. We're here to help you keep your farm running smoothly when it matters most. Can't make it to the show? Just head over to caseih.com to explore our full range of machines online. And right now, you can take advantage of some great finance offers exclusively from CNH Capital. Business use only. Terms and conditions apply.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. Hugh, Louise, free zone this week, as we said at the top of the podcast. Not many arable stories to talk about, but one story, Vivergo, the bioethanol plant which turns wheat into transport fuel, now in talks with the government over its future. And that follows the government's decision to remove the 19% tariff on ethanol products imported from the United States. Vivergo warning that decision, that US-UK trade deal, will make the UK bioethanol industry unable to compete with cheaper US imports, and it's launched a consultation, Hugh, with staff on the possible closure of the facility, which would of course hit UK arable farmers hard, but it also says that any eventual outcome, open or closed for business, will depend on the progress it's able to make through these negotiations with the government.
Yeah, and that's good news that they are having a chat. Let's hope that it's a productive chat. They went in and saved British Steel. Let's hope they can go in, and this is a far more, I suppose it's a much smaller ask, but actually would have huge delivery, particularly across, you speak to anyone involved in the arable sector north of London, really, and they'll tell you that when that plant is drawing wheat, it does help to put an extra 5 or 10 or 15 quid on a tonne of wheat because of the demand profile. So if they can either come to some solution, the obvious one, Tom Bradshaw made a very good point at the cereals, didn't he, with your question time thing you did on the KWS stand. And he said, look, all the government needs to, if they upped the ethanol inclusion in the fuel to 30% then it would, simple job done. It would increase the volumes required, and it would help to counter some of the US stuff that's coming across or could come across under this trade deal. And obviously theirs is very subsidised, and the fear is that if that ethanol comes across, it will just utterly undercut the UK market, because it's a limited market because of the limits that are put on how the fuel is made.
Yeah, big story with huge ramifications for arable growers just before harvest. Hugh, I know you don't grow many, if any, cereals on your farm down there near Dorking, but have you been up to anything this week?
This week, the weather's been as crazy as ever. It's been hot. The maize is looking good. Needs a drink, but it actually, given how dry it is, it's looking all right. I think we did a good job. Colin with Edwards Cultivator did a very good job keeping that soil moisture in, created a nice mulch with the manure. It seems to be working at the moment. And it's just mad bonkers busy this time of year, isn't it? With events and stuff. And yes, it's good. It's good, Johann. What have you been doing this week? Have you been on farm?
Well, I have, Hugh, yes. First, though, we are going to talk about your local show, the Cowpie Show, a little later on. It always reminds me of something, that name, out of Desperate Dan or something like that. But, yeah, I have been out and about. I went to a fantastic Fram Farmers open day at James Forrest's farm near Stowmarket. We will be talking about that in a moment. But I guess for many of us, we are in that kind of lull between cereals and groundswell. Groundswell a little later this year than usual. We will, of course, be at Groundswell. Louise will be back, and we will be doing a full episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast, recorded as live from that 2-day event there near Hitchin in Hertfordshire.
Yeah, that will be good fun. I always look forward to Groundswell. The other thing that's happened this week as well, which is of note and is worth mentioning, and particularly as Louise isn't here, so we can talk about livestock stories and not arable ones, the government has announced an expansion of the animal health and welfare pathway, and they've made some subtle changes which hopefully will help more people take advantage of it. So this is where you basically, if you're a cattle or sheep, or I think it runs out into pigs as well, but certainly cattle, sheep, dairy cattle, sheep, beef and pigs, basically it helps fund a vet visit, so you can, if you're doing your health planning, it should cover the cost of that. The uptake on it has been steady, given that, when you say to farmers that perhaps aren't in farm assurance, well, why don't you get into farm assurance? Well, I've got to pay the vet to come out and do a health plan. Well, now they've got to pay the vet to come out and give them a van number if they want to export their lambs, but that's a different story. But in this case, it has been pretty slow. But the government, fair play, credit to DEFRA, they've stuck with this because it is a really good scheme, I think. And it pays for a couple of 3 hours of vet time, come out on farm, do your health plan, and they pay for it. So it's a no-brainer. And they've made it so that if you've got several businesses under one name sort of thing, then it's easier to apply for this for this support, and it's very easy to do. You just go online, and then the vet validates it, and then job done. You get paid the few £100 that covers it, and it means that they're doing testing, they're surveillance testing. So, for example, with cattle, you do the cattle visit, you have to do a BVD check on the cattle, so it's tracking stuff like that. So that's a good bit of news around government policy, and long may that continue. And the key thing is that producers need to get out there and take advantage of it, use it, or potentially lose it. And the government have stuck with this despite a fairly steady uptake, although it has picked up in latter months.
Thank you, Hugh. A little bit of good news then from the government. Hugh, have the markets got any good news for us too?
Thank you very much, Johann. Finished steer deadweight this week, 634.3. That drops back about 8p on the week. If you go back a year ago, it was 477.8, so it's still well ahead of where we were 12 months ago. If you are looking at the live weight, 361.6, that's actually gone up 3p on the week. Sheep prices continuing to firm. SQQ deadweight this week, 748.8, up from 724.2 last week. So there's some demand there, and good steady run on the sheep job at the moment. Obviously, that could change slightly depending on which side of the Welsh border you live at, but presumably they can process sheep on both sides of the border. There won't be too much of an impact on the fat trade. 353.5 is the SQQ on the live weight. That's actually back about 6p on the week, but that dead weight really hammering on, bidding on there. Pig price drops back 0.2 of a penny to 207 dead at the moment. And then into the world of arable, which I'm afraid is not a good one. Everything seems to have dropped back this week, so I'm not sure whether the pound has just suddenly strengthened or whether more data's come out, which has depressed prices even more. So feed wheat's dropped back £1 to 159.60. Milling wheat drops back £4 to 179. Feed barley goes back £3 to 143.10. Oilseed rapes drop back £25 exactly. So it's £400 and 70p, back from 425.70 last week. Feed peas 223.30. They've actually gone on about 10p, and feed beans have gone on 3p, 228.3. Red diesel, not surprisingly, well, it stayed up, but it hasn't. I mean, the market's been not as spiky as it may have been, considering all that's been going on in the Middle East over the last 2 weeks. This week's Wednesday ring round for red diesel, 69.97. Is literally up 0.3 of a penny over the week. So hopefully not too much of an impact there on those fuel prices.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, a pre-harvest open day in Suffolk attracted about 350 growers this week, organised by the farmer-owned cooperative Fram Farmers with Basef and Warnes seeds. The day included a chance to see how more than 20 wheat varieties have fared during another challenging season, and meet more than 60 farm suppliers who will be helping keep the wheels turning during harvest. Here's seed specialist Chessie Aitchison.
Yeah, so we have 24 variety on the recommended list out there. We've got winter wheat, and we've got 3 from the candidate list, all the rest from the recommended list. And yeah, we're just looking at what they look like, especially with the YR15 breakdown. So we're happy to have them, happy to see them.
People will be used to going to events like cereals and seeing all the wonderful new varieties that they are lovingly looked after. This is very much about real in-field results here in Suffolk, looking at how, well, some of these are tried and tested varieties, how they are performing in real-world conditions.
Absolutely. I mean, I say it time and time again, the way a seed reacts on your farm comparison to where it reacts, where it's been lovingly and tenderly looked after, is very different. Here it's had a normal spray programme, and we also have one that has just had a T0 spray. And it's, we've got tried and tested, older varieties, new varieties and candidate varieties here. So you can really see a full breadth. But yeah, if your old favourite, you want to know if it's still performing on farm, you can come out and you can see it here.
And which ones are still performing? Which are sort of I don't know. I know we shouldn't have favourites perhaps, but which ones are you particularly interested, or are people particularly interested in?
Yeah,
here today?
so I mean, you've got your old favourites. Crusoe, grain quality as a Group 1 is absolutely exceptional, and Millers still like it. We're hanging on to Gleam. There's some real people that love it. And then, moving forward, we've got some absolute market share wise popular varieties. Dawson, Beowulf this year's got 17.5% market share. Bamford again, a soft wheat, absolutely fantastic. And then moving on from that, the newer varieties that are coming in. You've got KWS Vibe, which is the new Group 1. Looks very nice out there, along with Cheer, which came on the list last year. And we've also got, a feed variety. We've got KWS Scope as well. So you see literally the whole list from front to back.
The big story, perhaps not here in Suffolk and further north this year, coming down the east, has been yellow rust. Any rust out there in the varieties? Are they bearing up quite well?
They are doing better than expected. We haven't really seen too much of it in the east, but it's out there and out in that field. As much as we can't see it, we can definitely talk about it, and we know from results that we've seen leading up to this day what is out there and what we can do to help farmers mitigate that.
We're on the cusp of harvest, but people will already be looking to the autumn and drilling. What sort of varieties are they looking to get in the ground this autumn?
I would say, your Group 1s, they're always going to be popular with Group 1 growers. If you're a professional Group 1 grower, Vibe is your choice, but it's short. It's not, there's not lots of it. The rest of them, they're all doing fairly well. KWS Arnie, the new Group 2, it's a step on again in technology-wise. And you've got Scope in there, the new Group 4, which looks good. I'd say Beowulf's still got a strong hold, but yeah, there's lots to see, lots to like. Lots to see, lots to like, and lots to choose from as well. Chessie, thank you very much. No problem, thank you.
That's Chessie Aitchison from Fram Farmers. Also at the event was Abigail McCartney from Live Lab. She was testing moisture meters.
It's great to meet farmers. I've been coming down to Suffolk to see the Fram guys for probably 20 years. So a lot of these people are friends as much as customers now, and so it's always good to catch up with them when they come around with their moisture meters. I've been dealing with sons as well as fathers now, which is nice, which probably shows how much older I'm getting. But it's really good just to keep their moisture meters in line, because then when they get out there in the field, they get combining at the right time, which is just what they want to be doing, really.
Do they stay calibrated? Are they wildly out from year to year? It's important to get things tested, yeah? Yeah,
it is. We've probably done about 250 metres today, so it's been a big day. But most of the ones I've done have been pretty good, actually. I've only had one or two that have been sort of wildly out, and I've only condemned one, I think, so that's not too bad. But yeah, they must have stayed fairly well from last year. Yeah. You condemned one. That was just wildly inaccurate, was it? Or was it really old, or what was wrong with it? It wasn't an old one. It was probably only 6 or 7 years old. It just wasn't working. It just wasn't. It was about 10-12% out. So I think I just frowned a bit and decided that one was better off in the bin. That's a significant amount. I mean, what should people do other than testing them? They should treat them with care, I guess. They're precision instruments after all, yeah? Some need to be treated with a bit more care than others. So if they've been rattling around in the Land Rover footwell for 6 months, then they're perhaps not in the best shape. But if they sit in the grain store and that's where they stay, then that's good for them. And the ones that sit on the combine tend to be okay as well, because they don't get thrown around too much.
That's Abigail McCartney from Live Lab. And for those farmers still looking for harvest help, Paul Harris from HR Experts Real Success had some good advice too.
A lot of farms, arable farms, don't actually have that many staff. It's often father, son, even people working by themselves. But for those that have got staff, it's the same issues as everybody else. How do we get them? How do we keep them? Those are the sort of questions we've been asked today. A real challenge for some farms in the run-up to harvest. You've got to get those casual workers in, those seasonal workers, students perhaps. Any hints and tips as to what people who aren't fixed up might be able to do now? I mean, talk to colleges. I think a lot of students are looking for summer work, particularly if they've finished their coursework. Now's the time to go and grab them. So build relationships with your local colleges, speak to them, see if they've got anybody that would like some work over the harvest period. And then there are people out there who look for harvest work. So get on social media, put something out on your Facebook page if you've got one. If you haven't get one, put it out there. There are lots of groups that you can get onto social media where you can put details of you looking for work, or speak to recruitment agencies, people like ourselves that can help you find somebody.
And for students looking for work, I guess the same thing goes. Put yourself out there a little bit, be proactive, don't wait for people to come to you.
Yeah, I do get farmers that say they love it when someone turns up at the door. So if you're a student and you're near to a farm and you're interested in getting some tractor experience or just working on any sort of farm, just go and knock the door and ask to speak to the farmer and say you're ready and available. That shows that you are proactive. Obviously pick up the phone. You can normally get people's numbers from websites if they've got them. Ask around, who's looking for work. But certainly there's no harm in just literally turning up at a farm and knocking on the door. That often works really well.
There is an opportunity for youngsters, for students to earn a lot of money, perhaps more money than they've ever earned before during harvest. It is hard work though. It is long hours. Have you got any hints and tips for keeping safe when you're running on, not running on empty, but you know what I mean?
Well, I think the from a HR perspective, we would say as a HR company, be careful with that. Yes, the money's great and farmers will often allow you to work very long hours, but there are some legal rules around how many hours you're supposed to work. There are also rules around the gap between shifts, which is supposed to be a minimum of 11 hours. So I would say, yes, be prepared to work hard, but look for those farmers that are not just looking for slave labour. Look for a farmer that actually can have a conversation with them, ask them what they're looking for, what type of hours it will be, and try and be sensible. It's a sensible balance between earning great cash during the summer but staying safe.
As Paul Harris from Real Success, the event was held at Monas Hall near Stowmarket, courtesy of host farmer James Forrest, and I asked James what harvest's looking like for him.
I think considering how little rain we have had this spring, I find it quite remarkable how the crops have hung on. The rainfall that we've had recently seems to have been quite variable across the county. We had a little bit a few days ago now. What we don't really need now is lots of high temperatures. I was a bit nervous on Saturday when that touched just over 30. I thought, oh dear, but we'll just keep our fingers crossed.
Why is it important for you to host something like you're hosting today? You've got 60 odd exhibitors here. You've got Fram here, BASF. It's a big undertaking.
It is, Johann, but I think I'm not going to take any of the credit for this. My team here on the farm and more them than me if I'm truthful, they've worked hard to tidy the place, help everybody set up their stands and that sort of thing yesterday. And the team at Fram and BASF put a lot of effort in too, and we're pleased to lend them the venue. We're nicely located in mid-Suffolk. We've got the space, and I think it's nice to be able to just offer the place to use. And actually, I said to someone earlier on, when they asked me what I get out of the day, I suppose there's a number of things really. I enjoy seeing everybody. I enjoy the fact that members are able to come here and meet suppliers. I think that the trials are great. We can look at all the, there's lots of farmers, members that come to this trials day to see the varieties on soils that are similar to their own at home. But something occurred to me this morning that I think is probably one of the things that I've never really considered actually, and that is the fact that it's a bit like whether you go to the Hadley show or the Suffolk show or any show, cereals, it's the opportunity to get off the farm and meet friends and catch up with people, because this can be a bit of a lonely job at times, especially if you work on your own. And with everything that's going on in the background at the moment, everything that seems to be thrown at us, it's I think quite good for everybody just to come and say hello to one another, have some refreshments, have a walk round, not be in too much of a rush, get off the farm, because there's some people struggling with mental health is something that's being talked about a lot more now. And if people make the effort to come to put all the work in to put a show on like this and people support it, I think everyone can be very pleased that they've done their bit, and hopefully everyone goes home feeling a little better and more informed and having seen their friends and had a nice hog roast or whatever it is.
A Suffolk farmer James Forrest wrapping up that report from the Monas Hall Trials Day, courtesy of Fram Farmers, BASF and Warnes Seeds. Hugh, a really, really fantastic day. Some great advice on offer, particularly liked Abigail's point about not leaving your moisture meter rattling around in the footwell of the Land Rover.
Yeah, they're a lot more robust. I think they're more robust now than they were. Clearly, it doesn't do them good to live in the footwell of a Land Rover with people standing on them or accidentally kicking them. And particularly if the basis of your decision making is based on one small instrument like that, you do really need to look after it. But they're probably more robust. I think we've actually still got it hidden in the back of the farm office from the days when we did actually grow corn here. And we've got one of those, my grandfather must have bought it probably in the 50s or early 60s, and the Marconi, the black box Marconi one, where you had the knobs you turned to get the number and the little needle stayed in the middle. And then you used to have a grinder. We had a little wooden table you used to sit in the grain dryer and with like a mincer grinder thing. It was like screwed onto the end of the table, and you had to grind the corn into one of Grandpa's tobacco tins, and then he showed me how you tap that out and it went into the little cell thing, and then you wound the cell in tight, and then you got your reading. Thinking back, I don't think it ever got calibrated very often, and quite often it was left in the dust, and in the last minute it was bought in the autumn, and then there was always problems trying to get batteries for it. But yes, bringing us slap bang up to date, getting the old Sinar or whichever meter you have calibrated is pretty important. And clearly, Johann, the fact that they've tested like a couple of hundred, so people are taking it seriously, which is good, and for obvious reasons, because it's the window on the world of arable, isn't it? When to go or when not to go.
And as I say, when the moisture's right, we'll go all night. And I think the point made by Paul Harris from Real Success that, getting this balance right during harvest between doing the job correctly, you're working long hours, earning great money, and also staying safe. That's so important too. It is the culmination of a year's work. It all hinges on a few weeks in the summer. It is hard work, of course. It is rewarding, immensely rewarding, the best time of year for a lot of people. But do remember, please do stay safe and don't overdo it. Fatigue can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah, it is. Look, this week, the other thing that came out of NFU Council was a big pledge by everyone to really focus down on the whole safety message, because we've still got some pretty horrendous cross-industry data on all sectors of the industry, and it's still really bad. And it's a real fine balance, isn't it? Because we've all been harvest students, and when I was still at school helping out on harvest next door, and crazy hours, and probably worse then. I mean, now in some ways it's easier because the young uns don't know they're born, because they just press buttons and they don't have to shovel bins, and the tractors almost drive themselves. I sound like a right old git, but if you go back then, it was a lot more manual. The machinery wasn't as sexy, and the trailers were smaller, so that in some ways the risks were lower because you were carrying smaller weights around. But in other ways, there's always risk there. But it is a fine balance, isn't it, between what is being really productive, but equally at the time, if the weather's closing in and you've got to get stuff done, it is really tough. But if you've got a great team, and if you're able to take on temporary staff and integrate them into that great team and produce an even bigger great team to tackle those tricky times, then it's a very precious and valuable thing, and it's something that we need to everyone needs to be reflective of. The employee welfare and the whole safety thing at the same time, and yet at the same time getting in. But we do a pretty damn good job when you think about it. When you actually sit back and look at the amount of tonnage that's moved in the short space of time that it is moved, and particularly on our little island with lots of tiny little roads and lanes, and the challenges and all the other people that are on our tiny little island. When you see these people out in the middle of America or the middle of Australia, where it's, each row up the field's 20 miles and you don't see anyone forever, and there's no problem moving big stuff around. The challenges here in the UK, we know, are abundant. So it is quite an achievement. But at the same time, we need to keep an eye on the staff, don't we?
Yeah, harvest underway for some people at least. More and more combines rolling, of course, over the coming weeks. For some people, though, it's still agricultural showtime. Hugh, you've been to your local show yourself.
Absolutely bonkers number of shows, isn't it? I went to our local Young Farmers show last Sunday, which was brilliant. The Cowpie show at Godstone. Normally it's in May, but they moved it to June because they've had 2 washout years. And it's like all the Young Farmers shows, it's our big fundraiser for the county going into next year. And it was great to see it back because it's been cancelled the last 2 years. Loads of people there and loads of young farmers doing lots of things. So that was great. Norfolk show this week, Johann, and Minister Zeichner was there. Absolutely resolute and solid on the government's following on from what we were saying earlier in the show about IHT. Zeichner absolutely solid on the IHT position of the government, so no great surprises there. And James Peck had a show. This is PX Farms. Presumably, Johann, it was full of all his YouTube Anorak friends, was it?
Well, it wasn't actually. I mean, massive numbers though. 2,000 people. Yes, of course, there were going to be some of James's or PX Farms YouTube fans there going along to sort of find out and what it's all about and see the farm in person. But also a big agricultural presence. Lots of farmers there. Some really, really good discussions going on, and lunch on long tables for about 1,500 people. A real success story for James. So well done, James Peck from PX Farms, and well done to everybody at the Monas Hall Trials Day there near Stowmarket too. And that, as we say, is about it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to us. And if you really like what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with a full live recorded episode from the Groundswell event in Hertfordshire. But until then, I'm Johann Tasker.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening.